Nobody walked into that courtroom expecting silence to become the loudest sound of the day. Karen marched in first, with chin up, voice loud, ego blazing, as if she owned the room. She didn't just disrespect the court, she insulted the very woman who built it. "Judge Judy can't scare me," she bragged, laughing loud enough for the audience to hear, as if she'd already won a battle that hadn't even begun. And maybe that's why what happened next shook everyone. Because this wasn't the legendary Judge Judy towering above the bench in power. Not today. Today she sat quiet. Almost too quiet. Like someone doubting she even needed to respond. For a moment she looked like the underdog in her own court, a woman underestimated in the one place she made famous, and Karen saw that calm as weakness. What she never understood was this: Judge Judy doesn't intimidate people with shouting. She destroys arrogance with silence first, and truth second. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. But there was something else. Something no one in that room knew except one person. A detail hidden, waiting like a fuse nobody realized had already been lit. Karen thought she walked in with control. In reality, she walked into a trap she set for herself. And in exactly 47 seconds, the only sound she'd be able to make was silence. If you love stories where arrogance meets consequences hard, hit like right now and subscribe, because this courtroom lesson only gets sharper from here. The courtroom door hadn't even fully swung shut before Karen's voice filled the air again. Dripping with smug righteousness, she walked like the carpet rolled at her feet, like the walls themselves owed her attention. That confidence wasn't just confidence, and it was entitlement polished into armor. To her, Judge Judy wasn't an authority. She was a prop. A character in the little performance Karen believed she was starring in. She clutched a thick folder to her chest, papers sticking out like trophies. "I came prepared," she announced loudly to nobody in particular but making sure everyone heard. "Unlike some people, I actually know how the law works." There it was. Not even 10 seconds in the room and she had already taken aim. Judge Judy didn't flinch, didn't posture, didn't even tighten her jaw. She simply adjusted her glasses and looked at the file in front of her, like she was reading something more important than a human hurricane stomping 3 feet away. But that subtle quietness, that stillness, and that's what always unnerved people. Judy wasn't ignoring Karen. She was registering her, filing her away like a case study. Arrogance, page 1. And Karen mistook that silence for vulnerability. "You can't scare me with your TV judge attitude," Karen continued, laughing under her breath. "I've dealt with worse than you." People in the audience shifted. Someone coughed. Someone whispered, "Oh boy." Because there's a difference between confidence and suicide by attitude. And Karen sprinted down that line like she couldn't wait to crash. Judge Judy didn't look up when she finally spoke. "State your full name for the record." Simple, clean, official, but Karen? She heard challenge instead of procedure. "You already know my name," she snapped. "And don't talk to me like I'm stupid." A tiny pause. A ripple in the air. Judge Judy raised her eyes slowly, not irritated, not offended. Curious. Like a doctor examining a patient who just described a headache as an existential crisis. "You're not stupid," Judy replied, voice low, steady. "You're emotional." "There's a difference," Karen scoffed, rolled her eyes so hard they almost left orbit. That reaction? It wasn't just disrespect, it was fear wearing Defiance's costume. But she didn't know she was afraid yet. Her brain just felt something she couldn't process. A woman who didn't bow to her chaos. "Well, I don't get emotional," she barked. "I get results." Silence. A long, slow exhale from someone in the front row. Karen misread that too. She assumed it was awe, not warning. Judge Judy leaned forward just an inch, enough to let gravity settle. "We'll see." And that's when Karen took it too far. She slammed her folder on the podium, papers flying like wounded birds. "You think I'm intimidated because you wear a robe, please? Half the people who watch your show are just bored retirees and cats walking across remotes." The room froze. Time didn't stop, dignity did. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered she must have a death wish. Judge Judy didn't react, not with anger, not with ego. That was the part nobody ever understood. She never owned control, and she simply was control. And when someone tried to steal what she never clutched, they fell through air. Karen mistook that stillness again. "See?" she said, spreading her arms. "Nothing to say, because you know I'm right. And here's the truth. The deep, quiet truth Karen didn't know she was walking face first into. Judge Judy saves her words the way surgeons save scalpels. She doesn't swing wildly. She waits until precision matters. Just then, Karen tried to shove a paper toward the bench. "I brought proof. Cold, hard proof. And if you think you can trip me up..." Judge Judy lifted one finger. calm, light as air, deadly as gravity. Karen froze mid-sentence like her voice hit a wall she never saw. Judy didn't even raise her volume. Ms. Henderson, do you know the difference between confidence and contempt? Karen blinked. Excuse me? One is earned, Judy continued, and one is borrowed from insecurity. A murmur. A ripple. Karen shifted, her face tightening. For the first time, a sliver of something slipped through her mask. Doubt. Something unfamiliar. Something she wasn't used to feeling around people she thought she could overpower. But she covered it fast. I'm not insecure, she snapped. I stand up for myself. Standing up, Judge Judy replied softly, is not the same thing as trying to stand above everyone else. That line stung. Karen's lips trembled. Her chest tightened. But pride is a dangerous drug, and hers was flooding her system. So now I'm the bad guy? She spat. For refusing to be bullied? No, Judy answered. Not for refusing to be bullied. For not knowing when you've become the bully. The audience held their breath. Karen's throat worked as she swallowed something. Ego, emotions, maybe panic. She didn't know it yet, but she was already losing. Not because of the judge's authority, but because she walked in a storm thinking the world was her umbrella. And then Judy delivered the quiet thing that would dig into Karen's ribs until the final blow arrived. Ms. Henderson, she said, voice calm as still water. I don't need to scare you. People like you defeat yourselves. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not silence out of obedience. Silence because her brain couldn't find the next insult. 47 seconds. That's all it ever takes for the truth to find someone who thinks they're untouchable. And Karen? She just heard the door close behind her ego, and didn't know yet that the lock was already turning. She thought this was still a performance. She didn't realize she wasn't the star anymore. She was the lesson. Something shifted in that courtroom. Not a loud crack, not a dramatic eruption, but a subtle, almost invisible tremor. The kind only the people paying close attention could feel. Karen still stood tall, chin raised, lips curled in that same stubborn sneer. But the ground beneath her confidence had just changed, and she didn't even know it yet. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, hands folded with a measured calm. She wasn't looming, wasn't barking, wasn't flexing authority. No, she did something far more dangerous. She waited, and patience when used by someone like her is a blade sharper than any raised voice. Karen misread it. As always. She saw silence and believed it was retreat. She saw calmness and assumed it was weakness. But there's a special blindness that only arrogance grants, and Karen wore it like makeup. Thick, smudged, obvious to everyone but herself. Well? Karen snapped, tapping her nails on the podium, trying to regain control she never actually had. Are you going to speak? Or do you need a moment to think? There was a hush in the room. Not fear, but anticipation. A courtroom full of people watching a woman dig her own grave one breath at a time. Judge Judy finally blinked, slow and deliberate, like she was resetting the atmosphere. I speak when there's something worth replying to, she said. A soft gasp traveled across the seats like wind. Someone's grandmother in the back actually whispered, "Oh my." Karen swallowed. The insult slid right past her armor and found a place to bruise, but Karen, she was the kind of person who mistakes pain for fuel, who hears correction and calls it provocation. So she doubled down, and of course she did. You think you're clever, she scoffed. A little witty remark doesn't win anything. Logic wins. And I've got logic on my side. Judge Judy didn't argue, didn't push back, just tilted her head. Then you'll have no trouble answering a question. I already told you Ms. Henderson, Judy cut in, voice like velvet over steel. I did not ask for commentary. I asked if you can answer a question. Silence. Karen's jaw tightened, her nostrils flared. Anyone else would have recognized the trap. But ego doesn't see traps and it steps proudly into them. Fine, Karen snapped. Ask. Judy lifted a single page from the case file. You stated you paid your rental fees on time for 6 months. Is that correct? Yes, Karen said immediately. Too immediately. And yet, Judy continued, turning the paper like a blade catching the light. The statement from your landlord shows missed payments in February and March. Karen blinked rapidly. That's wrong, is it? Judy asked, voice soft, inviting Karen to lie further. Or did you simply not read your lease agreement correctly? Karen's throat bobbed. Her eyes darted once, twice. A telltale stutter in her breathing. That was the first crack. I know what I paid, she muttered, trying to sound firm. Then you'll have no objection to us verifying with the bank records, Judge Judy replied. Oh, that was the second crack, and deeper. Karen's face faltered, just a flicker, but enough. Enough for the room to feel it. Enough for her bluster to tremble. I don't have them on me, she stammered. I didn't think I'd need them. Judy's eyebrow lifted. a silent verdict beginning to form. Prepared people bring evidence. You brought attitude. They are not substitutes. That line did something unusual to Karen. It made her blink slower than before, like her brain hit a pause button. She wasn't used to someone labeling her flaws so cleanly, so clinically, so accurately. And in that moment something clicked in the audience too. The realization that Judge Judy hadn't been the underdog at all. She had simply been waiting. Watching. Calculating the moment where one precise strike would be worth more than 10 loud ones. Karen tried one last push. You're twisting things. You always twist things to look smarter. Judge Judy didn't even blink. I don't need to twist anything. Your words are doing the work for me. The room exhaled collectively. Karen didn't know where to look, so she settled for outrage, the only emotion that still cooperated with her pride. You're trying to embarrass me, she said. But the words trembled. No, Ms. Henderson, Judy replied calmly. You came here embarrassed. I'm simply removing your cover. A tiny sound escaped Karen. Not a word, not a breath, just a small startled break in her armor. And just like that, the courtroom believed in quiet power again. The audience leaned forward not to watch a fight, but to witness a collapse disguised as a conversation. Karen walked into that courtroom thinking confidence was volume. But Judge Judy was teaching her that confidence is silence. Right before the strike, she just didn't realize yet the strike was already underway. Karen's face flushed a shade somewhere between frustration and panic, and the kind of red that comes when someone realizes the room is no longer laughing with them. It never actually was. She shifted her weight, shoulders tightening as though she could physically push the truth away with posture alone. But posture can't hide fear. It only magnifies it. Judge Judy didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe louder or lean forward or hold power in any dramatic way. She simply existed, and that alone felt heavier than Karen could handle. The courtroom sat in stillness, a kind of quiet that didn't just silence Karen as it exposed her. Ms. Henderson, Judge Judy said, her voice crisp. Do you understand that confidence without correctness is simply noise? If Karen could have swallowed the entire room, she would have. Instead, she swallowed her pride, or tried to. Her throat made a tiny click, the kind only people paying attention could hear, and everyone was paying attention. I know what I did, Karen shot back, but the words lacked oxygen. I don't need you to— You don't need me to what? Judy interrupted softly, slicing through Karen's sentence like silk wrapped around steel. Clarify reality for you? Karen blinked, stunned by how quickly Judy turned a question into a mirror. One woman in the back covered her mouth. A young man in the front whispered, She's done. But Karen refused to see the writing on the wall. People like her never do, not until the ink dries in bold letters they can't unread. You don't intimidate me, Karen insisted, voice cracking just slightly. I refuse to be bullied. Judge Judy leaned back ever so slightly, hands calmly folded in front of her. The power wasn't in her voice, and it was in her restraint. No one here is bullying you, she said. But there is something you should understand. When someone in this courtroom speaks with false bravado, I do not need to raise my voice. I let their own words work against them. Karen clenched her jaw. I am not here to be lectured. And yet, Judy replied, you are being educated. The words dropped like a gavel. But the gavel hadn't fallen, not yet. Judy wasn't delivering judgment. She was easing Karen toward the cliff, letting her walk herself right off the edge. Karen's fingers curled around the podium like she needed it to stand. Stop twisting everything. I haven't twisted anything, Judy answered with unnerving calm. I've simply repeated what you have given me. If that feels uncomfortable, perhaps consider the source, silence again. But not empty silence, heavy silence. A silence that exposed truth rather than hiding it. Karen's voice lowered, suddenly less certain. You're making me look bad on purpose. No, Judy said. I don't need to make you look a certain way. You walked in presenting yourself. I'm simply allowing the room to see you clearly. It was the kind of line that didn't just land. It echoed. Karen's eyes darted around the courtroom, searching, begging for someone, anyone, to meet her gaze with solidarity. But every face she found only confirmed what she feared most. She had never controlled the room. She had only been performing in it. There's a moment in every downfall when a person realizes the battle they thought they were fighting is actually the one they caused. Karen had reached that moment even if she wouldn't admit it. You think you're better than everyone, she muttered. Not loud, not arrogant, but defensive, almost pleading. Judy didn't flinch. No, I think everyone deserves dignity, including you, and that's why I give you the opportunity to present yourself with it. The implication hit harder than any insult. Judy wasn't fighting her. Judy was offering her a chance to stop fighting herself. and Karen didn't know how. She gripped the podium tighter, voice softening against her will. I'm just standing up for myself. And that's admirable, Judy replied, voice softer now too, but not weaker. But standing up for yourself begins with standing in truth, not hiding behind noise, a beat. Karen's breath hitched. A tiny, nearly invisible crack in her armor widened. Judy watched it, not cruelly, not triumphantly, but knowingly. She had seen this before, so many times. The moment arrogance discovers it isn't strength at all, just fear dressed loudly. Then Karen whispered, almost to herself, "I'm not wrong." Judy nodded once. "Then the evidence will show that." And there, right there, one was the shift. The emotional gravity flipped. Karen stood in the spotlight, she demanded. Only now she could feel the heat. For the first time, Karen wasn't speaking to Judy. She was speaking against the silence. And losing, the room waited. Judy waited. Even Karen waited, but for her confidence to return, but instead, fear arrived first, and everyone could see it. There comes a moment, small, almost invisible, when a person realizes they're no longer fighting someone else. They're fighting gravity, and gravity always wins. Karen didn't feel herself falling yet, but everyone else in the room already saw it. It showed in the way her shoulders sank just slightly, the way her bravado thinned, the way her words no longer echoed but dropped flat, lifeless on the floor. Judge Judy sat poised, chin raised, eyes steady, not a general ready for battle but a surgeon ready for precision. No wasted motion, no wasted breath. Power didn't need to announce itself. It simply was. Karen tried to break the silence again, but this time her voice lacked the fire it once carried. "You're trying to humiliate me." Judy blinked once, slow and deliberate. "No, I am giving you the dignity of clarity." "What you do with that clarity is up to you." That was the problem. Clarity terrifies people who built their identity on noise. And Karen suddenly had no noise left to hide behind. She wanted desperately to fight back, to throw insults like lifelines, but her tongue felt heavy, her thoughts muddled. Like arrogance had abandoned her right when reality arrived. "I'm not scared of you," she whispered, as if trying to convince her own pulse. "Good," Judy replied calmly. "Fear isn't necessary. Awareness is." The audience leaned in, not to see Judy's power, but to witness Karen's unraveling. Some moments don't belong to the victorious. They belong to the defeated because collapse is louder than triumph. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. A pause, a flicker of panic. That was the first second. Judy didn't raise her voice, didn't smirk, didn't savor control. She simply let Karen sit in silence, because silence is where truth breathes, and ego suffocates. Karen finally forced words out, but they stumbled like she'd forgotten how sentences worked. I know what's going on here. You're trying to intimidate me." Judy's gaze didn't move. No one can intimidate a person who truly stands in truth. Second number 12. Karen's throat tightened. She remembered the folder she slammed earlier, her so-called evidence. And in a frantic burst of desperation, she yanked papers out and waved them like a flag no one asked to salute. "See? These show—" Judy raised one hand, palm facing down, small, calm, a gesture that stripped oxygen from the air. "No more performances. Just answer a single question clearly." Karen froze. Everyone froze. A single heartbeat echoed in her ears louder than any applause she once imagined. Judy leaned forward for the first time. Not to intimidate, but to anchor the moment in steel. "When you claimed you made every payment on time, were you stating fact? Or emotion?" Karen's mind raced for a weapon. Instead, she found mirrors. I made most payments." "Fact or emotion?" Judy repeated, quiet enough to sound merciful, sharp enough to cut bone. Karen's hand shook. Paper trembled. The arrogance that once wrapped her voice now strangled it. "Emotion," she whispered, that one word. It cracked the world around her, and in that crack her confidence bled out. 32 seconds. Judy nodded once. Just once. Approval without victory. Command without cruelty. "Thank you. Now let's try honesty again." Karen looked down, not at the papers, but at herself, as if seeing for the first time the shape ego had carved into her. She blinked hard, and for a fleeting moment she looked like a child who discovered fire wasn't magic. "It burns. 41 seconds. "You may continue," Judy said softly, without pressure, without humiliation. Just truth. Karen tried to speak, but her voice came out like air escaping glass. I don't know what to say." And there it was. The moment the fuse reached the powder. Judy leaned back again, reclaiming stillness like a throne. That is what happens when noise runs out and only truth remains. 47 seconds. Silence. Absolute. Complete. Devastating. Karen wasn't silent because Judy demanded it. She was silent because the truth had finally caught up to her, and she didn't know how to outrun it anymore. The courtroom didn't cheer, didn't laugh, didn't celebrate. They simply witnessed. And in that witness, everyone learned something deeper than law. They learned the difference between power and posture, between voice and wisdom, between noise and truth. Karen came in thinking she couldn't be intimidated. She was right. She wasn't intimidated, she was humbled. And humility is louder than fear, because humility has nowhere to hide. For a few seconds after Karen's voice collapsed into nothingness, the courtroom didn't breathe. It didn't cough, it didn't shift, it didn't even blink. Silence became a wall, thick, heavy, unbreakable. And there Karen stood, trapped inside it with only her pride, wilted and trembling like a flower left in winter. She stared down at her own hands as if they betrayed her. The papers she'd once brandished like weapons now rested limp, useless, forgotten. Words had always been her armor, loud, confident, commanding words. And now she discovered the one place where words didn't just fail her. They abandoned her. Judge Judy didn't smile. She didn't nod. She didn't look triumphant or satisfied. Victory like this didn't need celebration. It simply was. She sat steady, posture firm but not aggressive, expression calm but unreadable, the way someone looks when they've seen moments like this unfold 1,000 times before. This wasn't her first arrogance, and it wouldn't be her last. But this one crumbled faster than most. Karen opened her mouth as if to speak again, a reflex, not a choice, but no sound dared follow. Not one word. Not one protest. Not even a lie trying to crawl its way out. Ego had left her stranded and reality wasn't offering a taxi. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. Not from sadness, but from witnessing something rare. A truth delivered so cleanly, it left no blood, only clarity. A man whispered, almost reverently, "That was brutal," and she didn't even raise her voice. His friend nodded slowly. Authority doesn't shout. It just exists. Karen heard none of it, but she felt all of it. The air around her vibrated with awareness, the realization spreading like quiet electricity. She lost. Not the case. Not yet. Something greater. Something louder. She lost the room. She lost the illusion. She lost herself, and when ego loses itself, it doesn't fall gracefully. It collapses like a bridge without bolts. Judge Judy finally spoke. Not to gloat, not to press her advantage, but simply because the court needed instructions. "Let's proceed," she said softly, as if the moment hadn't already echoed into everyone's bones. And that was what made it powerful. The gentleness. Power doesn't need volume. It needs truth. She turned a page, looked down, and in that simple motion she gave Karen the most merciful grace arrogance could ever be offered. The grace of moving on. But Karen couldn't move on. Not yet. Not when the ground still quaked beneath her feet. She swallowed again, desperate to catch any piece of her former composure. The problem wasn't just fear now, it was exposure. Exposure burns deeper than shame. She shifted her papers again, trying to regain purpose. But the courtroom wasn't looking at the papers anymore. They were looking at her. At the woman who came in breathing fire and now stood breathing dust. Her voice, when it finally scraped free, was thin, fragile, human. I didn't mean to lie," she murmured. Judy glanced up. Not harshly, not coldly, but with measured care. "I didn't accuse you of lying. I simply asked if you were speaking from fact or feeling." That was the strike, gentle, surgical. Karen's knees almost buckled. Behind her, someone took a tiny breath, the kind you only release after realizing you've been holding it too long. The truth of moments like this, they don't punch, they seep. And while Karen stood there trying to rebuild her narrative, the courtroom shifted in tone. Not hostile, not mocking, reflective. They weren't looking at a villain anymore. They were looking at a mirror, because every person in that room at some point in their life had been Karen. Too loud, too certain, too fragile to admit they weren't right. That's the thing about arrogance, and it never feels like arrogance to the one wearing it. It feels like armor, until reality taps it, and it shatters like glass. Then came the rustle. Phones sliding up, screens lighting, fingers moving. Not to record. The moment had already passed. But to tweet, to text, to write the words no one could say out loud just yet. She thought Judy couldn't scare her. Turns out silence did. And in those screens, Karen's humiliation found new wings. It only took one person whispering, "TikTok is going to eat this alive," for the ripple to turn into a wave. Suddenly, Karen wasn't fighting Judy anymore. She was fighting the world she just fed. A courtroom is temporary. The internet? It's forever. Judge Judy tapped her pen once. We'll take a short recess, she announced. No urgency. No victory. Just order. People stood slowly as if leaving a theater after a scene that hit deeper than they expected. The room buzzed now, not chaotic but reverent. Karen didn't move. She couldn't. One woman near the exit paused, looked Karen's direction and whispered almost kindly, almost sympathetically. She's learning, not losing. Learning, and that was the cruelest mercy, because learning hurts far more than losing. Losing ends a moment. Learning rewrites identity. Karen finally managed to breathe, but it came out shaky, uneven. She thought power was volume. She thought strength was defiance. She thought fearlessness was dominance, but real power, real strength, real fearlessness, they stand in truth, not noise. Judge Judy didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to scold, humiliate, or punish. She simply let Karen meet herself. And for the first time in her life, Karen didn't like who she saw, and that, more than anything else, silenced her. The recess bell chimed softly, not urgent, not dramatic, just a gentle tone meant to break tension, but no one in the room moved with ease. They didn't rush for coffee or conversations or fresh air. They rose slowly, quietly, as if they had witnessed something sacred or something dangerous. Maybe both. A courtroom isn't usually a place where silence feels like a teacher. But today silence had dragged Arrogance into the light and left it trembling. Karen still hadn't moved. She stood there gripping the podium as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Just minutes earlier she was loud, certain, untouchable. Now she looked like someone trying to understand gravity for the first time. Like she'd never realized how heavy pride could be when it collapses onto your shoulders. People passed her in the aisle, not smirking, not mocking. Instead, they behaved with that rare kind of respect reserved for someone who had just crashed into their own truth. That's the thing about humility. When it arrives violently, even spectators grow quiet. Judge Judy had already stepped off the bench, robe flowing, steps measured. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't even glance back. She didn't need to. Authority that comes from ego always checks the room after it speaks. Authority that comes from truth never looks over its shoulder. Karen finally sat or collapsed into her seat. She stared forward, eyes unfocused. She wasn't thinking about rent records anymore. She wasn't thinking about proving anything. She wasn't even thinking about Judge Judy. She was thinking about herself. And in that moment, it hurt. The bailiff brought her a cup of water. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The world had spoken already. Her fingers shook as she wrapped them around the cup. And the courtroom, now filled with soft whispers, didn't see a villain anymore. They saw a person learning the cost of pride in front of strangers. Judgment had not been delivered yet, but the lesson already had, because sometimes the worst punishment isn't losing, it's realizing what made you lose. And Karen's defeat wasn't written in ink, it was written in silence. Minutes earlier, when her voice abandoned her and honesty walked in its place. Minutes later, everyone slowly filtered back into the room. Conversations died down, phones tucked away, not out of fear and out of anticipation. They had seen the fall. Now they wanted to see what stood back up. Judge Judy returned, not rushed, not energized, simply present. That was her greatest power, presence without performance. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the room, then at Karen. "Ms. Henderson," she began, "do you feel ready to continue?" Karen's eyes lifted, not defiant, not fierce, not armored. Just open, vulnerable, human. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. No tremor, no false confidence, no bravado. Just a soft, steady tone. If only she had entered the room with that same voice, that same humility, the day might have gone differently. But growth often arrives disguised as humiliation. Judge Judy nodded. Good. The next questions were straightforward, clear, basic. Karen answered each one honestly, quietly. No theatrics. No attacks. No interruptions. The courtroom breathed easier. Even the opposing party watched with softened eyes. Some stories aren't about winners and losers. Some are about transformations. And this one had turned into that without anyone realizing when it happened. "Do you dispute the payment dates now that you've seen the bank records?" Judy asked. Karen shook her head. "No, Your Honor." "And do you accept responsibility for the late fees?" "Yes," Karen replied. "I do." No resistance. No explanations. Just acceptance. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "Thank you. That's all I needed." Then to the clerk. "Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount owed. No penalties beyond documented fees." A murmur moved through the room. Not shock, not celebration. Relief. Judy hadn't crushed Karen. She corrected her. The hammer never needed to fall. The truth already had. Court adjourned. People gathered their belongings. A few glanced toward Karen. Not with cruelty, but with the quiet acknowledgement you give someone who just survived a storm of their own making. And Karen, she didn't storm out. She didn't slam her folder. She simply stood, smoothed her shirt, gathered her papers carefully, then took a slow breath. Before leaving, she looked back at Judge Judy. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she didn't see an opponent. She saw a mirror. "Thank you," she said softly. 2 words, no excuses, no sarcasm, just gratitude, born from a bruise that would heal stronger. Judy nodded once. Not warmly, not coldly, untruthfully. "Learn from this." "I will," Karen replied. And that was the most honest thing she'd said all day. She walked out. Not beaten, not broken, just smaller in the right ways and bigger in the right places. Sometimes the harshest lesson becomes the greatest turning point. Sometimes silence isn't punishment, it's permission to change. And as she exited that courtroom, she carried no more armor. Just awareness. Outside the courthouse, murmurs filled the air. Some replayed the scene, others debated what moment the shift happened. But one thing was clear, no one left unchanged. Clips had already begun circulating. Headlines already forming, comments already flooding in. People online weren't laughing, and they were reflecting. Because everyone had been Karen once. And everyone wished they had a Judge Judy moment before life humbled them harder. Karen didn't lose that day. She got something rare. A public defeat that birthed private growth. And the internet, instead of tearing her apart, unexpectedly respected it. Not because she never broke, but because she did and rebuilt herself in real time. Later in chambers, Judy removed her robe. Another case finished. Another lesson delivered. She didn't brag. She didn't boast. She didn't post quotes or collect credit. She simply continued, calm, steady, certain. Because real authority doesn't crave applause. It just moves forward. And in that courtroom today, she taught more than law. She taught leadership, humility, accountability, and the quiet strength of truth spoken softly. Karen never feared Judy. She feared herself. And by facing that fear, she left better than she arrived. That, not the judgment, was the real verdict. If you believe, respect beats arrogance, humility is strength, and silence can teach louder than shouting, then subscribe now and stay with us, because real power isn't noise and it's truth. And here we tell stories that remind the world of it. Comment humility wins if you felt this lesson, and I'll see you in the next courtroom story, where ego steps in, and truth walks out with the verdict.